Imagine this, yeah? You go into a dodgy back street and you meet a shifty character in a hoodie and he asks you, what do you need? 4, 6 or 8? And you go, 8. I need an 8. I desperately need an 8. So he messages on his phone. Meanwhile, you hand over a bag full of cash, unmarked notes, crumpled and all of that sort of thing. 5 minutes later, a brand new Ford Mustang rolls out of that alleyway. You haven't bought drugs. You've bought a car. Well, a V8. It's kind of like buying drugs, really. It's a bit intoxicating. I've always thought so anyway. But yeah, is this where we're going? Is this what it's going to end up like? Are we going to end up with a black market for petrol cars, maybe diesel cars as well, but probably more likely petrol cars? Why am I talking about this? Because of course we've got that ban coming in 2030, which if you think, 2030 is a long way away, no, it's only 6 years away. That's nothing. 2030 ban on petrol, on the sale of brand new petrol and diesel cars. Now you will say that, well, hang on, but Rishi Sunak, or the previous Prime Minister, moved that to 2035, didn't he? Yes, but the new government, the Keir Starmer government, is likely to move it back to 2030. And so then that will be the cutoff for the sale of brand new petrol and diesel cars. To be honest, it's all a bit of jiggery-pokery, as I've said before, as I've said and explained in previous videos, because that 2030 headline deadline marker is meaningless, really. Because what we really got here in the UK is something, well, it's called a ZEV mandate, but there's a more official name for it as well, but we all know it as a ZEV mandate. And basically what that stipulates is an ever-increasing number, a ratio of electric cars that must be sold by dealers in the UK, or they incur fines and the rest of it. So for example, starting in 2024, it was 22%, and it goes up by percentages every year. And then when you get to 2030, it's actually 80%. So only 20% of those cars sold new at that time can be petrol or diesel. Like I said, most likely petrol. And those are only hybrids. So you'll only be allowed to, so after post 2030, it'll only be hybrids, which are likely to carry on till 2035. And that's an interesting point, that, because not a lot of people realize that. And when I say hybrids, I'm probably talking about plug-ins. They haven't actually stipulated what sort of hybrids, but more than likely it's going to be plug-in hybrids because of the fact that the emissions are much lower and the MPG overall is much, much higher on those. Let's get a little bit more into the details regarding what people know about what's happening and how that might impact all of us. We'll do that right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
Okay, so this is based on research from the Green Insurer. And it's quite interesting because they said that 60% of drivers plan to buy a new car before the 2030 ban kicks in. And I think that, people know that it's 2035, or it was, because that was widely publicized, but I think that there was also widely publicized that the Labour Party would move it back to 2030 if they came into power. They are into power, and that's likely to happen. So 60%, so let's just call it 2030. So 60% of drivers plan to buy a new car before that ban kicks in. The majority of those, that's 2 in 3 motorists, that's 68% of that 60% that are going to buy a new car before 2030, say that they will be buying a petrol or diesel car. And so basically we're talking about nearly 70% of new car buyers between now and 2030 saying, nah, we're going to stick to fossil fuel. This is bad news for that ZEV mandate and the car dealers in the car industry, which is already kind of finding that there's a slowdown in the growth. Still growing, electric car sales are still growing, but there's a slowdown in the growth. And most of the growth that they're seeing is in the corporate fleet sector, company car sales, because there is the BIK benefit in kind taxation benefit of buying lower emission cars, which also, by the way, applies to hybrids and plug-in hybrids as well. So you need to keep that in mind. So anyway, so a lot of people are buying them because of that purpose. Less so private buyers. So this is what's happening. And as we can see from this, and I'm assuming that this survey has been done with private car buyers, it's pretty clear that 68% of those planning to buy a new car between now and 2030 are confirming that they will buy a petrol or diesel car. But I'm also going to say petrol from now on rather than diesel. And the reason being is because diesels pretty much been on a downhill slope for a few years now, ever since there were the scandals and stuff like that. Diesel has fallen out of flavor, or favor even, and because of the emission standards that also exist, such as the ULEZ, the ultra low emission zone in London, which really punishes diesel cars that are really not very old, because we're talking about there's a cutoff point pretty much from 2015 backwards. So diesels post 2015 are generally okay, but anything before that. So if you think about that, we're talking about cars that are less than 10 years old. And for a lot of people, that's not necessarily, a scrappy old banger. That's a pretty decent car. So they've been hit pretty hard, whereas some petrol cars as far back as, all petrol cars as far back as 2006, and some as far back as the late 90s are actually ULEZ compliant, but in some cases you have to get certification. That's all covered elsewhere on my channel and my content, etc., etc. But the point of it is that the diesel has fallen out of favor for a while now. Diesel sales have been dwindling. Manufacturers are offering less and less diesels, even in the SUV segment, which previously, if you remember, used to be dominated by diesel engines. There's less and less available. And if you think about it, I think there's going to be fewer and fewer available by the time we get to that 2030 deadline, 6 years hence. Even if we said 2035, no way there'll be any of these around. And this is the thing. Even with petrol cars, when you look at what's happening with model ranges, and again, some people are rolling this back, because already, for example, as I stated in a recent video, Volvo, for example, have said that they initially had announced, this was about 3 years ago, they announced, big fanfare, they were like, we're going fully electric by 2030, that's what we're going to, and then now they're just saying, oh, well, you know what, actually, we're probably going to have some hybrids, So a lot of manufacturers are sort of rolling back on their commitments. Nonetheless, many of them are already sort of in the momentum. They're already like, it's like an unstoppable train where they've already committed to pretty much changing their entire model range to electric. They may be able to keep some models or slow it down or whatever. There are other factors that are causing them to discontinue models in addition to these bans. But for example, Data Protection Act, I covered that in another video. For example, the Porsche Boxster Cayman is going to be killed because there's a Data Protection Act requires an update of software, which is too expensive and prohibitive to do in some of these modern cars. So the easiest thing is to just kill them off. So, it doesn't mean like if a manufacturer has a car, they just like indefinitely keep it on sale. No, because there's other things, safety legislation, European standard legislation, such as, for example, cars now have to have speed limiters in them. So they actually, in all of Europe, so all cars now have those fitted in them. Even here in the UK, they're not activated as limiters, they're called intelligent speed assist, but they're there in the car, and in Europe they actually are, they will actually restrict your speed as well. So, there are all these things that come along that actually stop manufacturers from continuing to keep old cars on sale, which is a little bit different from how it used to be, because remember, some manufacturers would keep cars on sale for a decade or more, pretty much unchanged, with a few tweaks and updates and stuff like that. So the ban on hybrid is 2035. So not a lot of people know this, and actually I'll get into the figures on that. But that to me also seems to be a little bit of a shame, because for a lot of people that can't quite move to electric, hybrid really is going to be the answer, especially plug-in hybrids, because it gives you the best of both worlds. The combination is just brilliant. And if you look at the miles per gallon figures, sometimes they're ridiculous numbers, but that's because they're going along the lines that you're not going, because if you think about the fact, even today you can buy plug-in hybrid cars with EV-only ranges of 40 to 70 miles, in some cases even more. So if you think about the fact that the average commute in the UK for most people is less than 30 miles per day, if you have the facility to keep that car plugged in most of the time, then effectively you won't be using the fuel in that car at all, except, for example, when you think, oh, I need to make that road trip, or I need to make that emergency journey to Birmingham or whatever, because a family member is ill or something like that, you can do so without having to worry about charging on the way and stuff like that. So for a lot of people, the plug-in actually provides the best of both worlds, and it's a real shame that they're talking about killing those as well by 2035. Hope you're enjoying this video. If you are, make sure you hit that like button, comment, share, tell the world. Right, so let's go back to these figures, which are from the Green Insurer. As I said, 60% of drivers plan to buy a new car between now and 2030. 68%, that's nearly 70%, nearly 2 in 3 motorists saying that, you know what, electric, nah, it's okay. I'm going to stick with fossil fuel for now. That's what they're saying. Only 19% are saying that they will go electric in that time. This is literally like the last hurrah for a lot of people. They're like, I'm going to still buy petrol while I still can. That's what's happening here. Now, 88% of people know that this ban is coming into place, the 2030, 2035 ban. 88% of motorist drivers, car buyers know, according to the stats, that that's happening. But 64% of drivers did not know that hybrids are also going to be killed in 2035. They didn't know that. And even if you think about the 88%, that's still 12% of people out there don't realize that this is happening, that there's a ban on petrol and diesel new car sales that is coming. So that's 12% didn't know that. 64% didn't know that hybrids will also be killed off. And I can understand that because so many manufacturers are introducing these amazing new hybrids, and a lot of engineering, technology and development, R&D is going into the development of hybrid, different kind of hybrids. So you got the electric dominant hybrids, you got the normal hybrids, you got the range extender hybrids, all kinds of amazing technology is happening right now. So you think like they must be investing in this for the next 10 years or 15 years. And when you think about it, actually, they've got 10 years, basically, according to the 2035 deadline. Of the people that did want to buy electric cars, so the 19%, a quarter of those people said that they had no idea where they're going to plug it in. So yeah, and you know what? I can't really blame them because, for example, I live in London. Well, I live in an apartment, in a flat, and I can't plug a car in here. If I have an EV on test or something, I can't plug it in here. Run a cable down my balcony into the communal car park. I can't do that. Residence car. I think the other residents would object to that. But when I think about where can I charge, I know there's a couple of chargers there, but I've had instances where they're not working or they're not available. So, it suddenly becomes all kinds of difficult, really, as opposed to a petrol car, which, I know there's a petrol station there, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there. It's like, 4 in my immediate vicinity. So, it's never going to be a problem. Of the people that were going to buy an electric car, of the 19%, of those, 45% said that they would park the car in their driveway, and 12% said that they would be putting it in their garage, which of course means that they would be charging them at home. They would obviously have a home charger, a smart charger, and they'd be able to charge at home, which is the best way of running an electric car, and the most economical as well. But 9% said that they would charge it close to home on the street, on a car park, again using public chargers, which are more expensive. 7% said they would use a charging station at a supermarket or at a petrol station, and 2% said that they would do it at work. Just 2%. And I think that's down to the fact that not a lot of employers are providing that facility, so a lot of large employers really need to think about this now. So with 25% of them saying that they had no idea where to charge an EV, the CEO of the green insurer, Paul Baxter, is basically, he said that he's all for the ban on the new petrol and diesel cars, because don't forget, this is the green insurer, and this is a step towards a greener future. But even he admits that there's a lot of convincing left to do. People need affordable EV options, reliable charging infrastructure, and probably a few really good incentives for them to make that transition across. I should just mention that these figures are from the Green Insurer, and they put this out because they obviously provide sort of eco insurance policies, and they provide discounts depending on the car you drive, etc., and they do like carbon offset schemes and stuff like that. So if you do drive an EV, it's definitely worth checking them out because you might be able to get a cheaper insurance policy. Anyway, I want to hear from you. I want to know what you guys think, because if you're thinking about buying, are you thinking about buying a new car between now and 2030? Let's call it 2030. And if you are, is it going to be a petrol? Is it going to be diesel? Is it going to be electric? Tell me in the comments below and explain which option you would go for and why would you go for. And like I said before, if you're going to go for a petrol, and it's probably petrol, because I think diesels are pretty much going to be phased out within the next few years, you better make it quick. Anyway, I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. Meanwhile, make sure that you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and you turn on the notifications to keep up to date with all of this sort of stuff. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.